Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. I have Mr. David Hirschfeld coming on, and David and I are going to talk about how do you launch off a new X? You fill it in. We're going to talk about how you do this with software. We're going to talk about how you do this with a new product, a new initiative, and how you pre-sell the process and don't pay for things like development, put lots of money and time and energy into this until you know it's a converting offer that you should be putting your time, money, and energy in. And the reason for this is so many companies, they get an idea and they're like, oh, I'm going to monetize this idea, and they'll just kind of push it out. There's a process that if you do it in the right way, it will be far more profitable for you, far less headaches, and so on and so on. So we're going to talk about that and how you couple the sales process, the marketing process on and around that. It's a great episode. It's not just for people who are solely interested in software, but for those of you who are, it also goes into that as well. Folks, those of you who are interested in stopping the number one sales leak in your business, which is follow-up, we have a masterclass we're doing. It is www.ceosalesstrategies.com/stop the leak. That's stop the leak. So ceosalesstrategies.com /stop the leak. Come to the masterclass, learn about follow-up, learn about what you can do for that. You'll boost your revenue easily by 5 to 20% by just knowing how and doing follow-up. With that being said, let's go talk to David right now. Hey, David, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. Thanks so much for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me, Doug.
Why don't you tell everybody what you do, and let's set the frame for this call.
Sure. I'm a software developer. I started Tekyz. We're a custom software development shop 18 years ago. And we work with startups and scale-ups of all different sizes and in lots of different business domains, healthcare, finance, real estate. And we help them, if they're startups, we help them figure out a method of launching, improving product market fit, and generating revenue even before we start developing the software.
Well, that's not a novel concept for most people to actually generate revenue before they even start the project, but it's an intelligent one. So let's dive into that for a second. Like,
Sure.
right, in general, companies come up with these ideas, and I've seen companies do these things, David, where it's just like, oh yeah, I was involved in one actually, Chet Holmes International. One day, Chet comes to me, and we're doing about 12 million or so, and he comes to me. He goes, "We're going to change our whole model." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, let's go to this whole new thing." And I said, "When?" He said, "By Monday." I'm like, "Chet, it's Friday." Like, he's like, "I'm pretty confident it's going to work." I'm like, "I'm confident it's not going to work. I know our audience. I've been here for like 3.5 years." And long story short, he demanded it, and I tested it, and he wanted to be in the first room to pitch it. And I stacked the room full of like really bigger companies, right? Because they usually convert better. And it was a bomb. It was just like, I mean, the conversion rate was under 12%, and that was with me following up. And our normal conversion rate was 43.2%.
Yeah,
So
that's a bomb.
yeah. And, he had this thing called pig-headed discipline and determination. And I had I would say, not an argument, but a very strong debate with him that sometimes, when you have too much pig-headed discipline and determination, that's, you can run into battle thinking you're going to take on the 10,000 troops on the other side by yourself, but you're probably going to get wiped out, right? That type of thing.
Yep, that's right.
And so in business, when people are doing this, whether it's software or a sales initiative, I mean, it seems like it's self-evident based on what we're just talking about, but so many people do this. They run into something and they don't do any testing before they launch it. They just come up with an idea. They think, well, this is going to fit. And they do it in software all the time. I see this all the time. I have made that mistake in software, and it's cost me literally, almost $1 million. So from your perspective, what is the best way to do this step by step by step, whether you're launching off a new sales initiative or a new technology or a new whatever.
Mhm. And and it's easier to talk about the worst way to do it than the best way to do it, because there's a lot of good ways to do it if you have the right mindset. But
Mhm.
the worst way to do it is to have the mindset that you believe you're going to be successful. I know the only reason you go into business or pick a direction to create a new product is because you believe it's going to be successful. But you need to quickly dispatch those beliefs. And basically, I say it's peeling off the black robe, the religious conviction about this thing, and wrap yourself in a white coat and become a clinician. And test every assumption and recognize that probably everything you're thinking about the product is an assumption other than your own usage of the product, potentially usage. So if you're solving a problem that you struggle with yourself, then you may create a product that you want to use, and you may think you want to use it and end up not even wanting to use it once you actually build it. So it's really important to step back and say, I've got a lot of assumptions. This is a business. I have to drive revenue. How do I prove that I can drive revenue with this idea in the shortest amount of time possible? And so what we do is we take this model, the idea that, okay, I've got an idea. I want to build a software product. I believe it will be important for business in this respect because it solves these problems. So I'm always working with entrepreneurs to get back, what's the problem you're solving? Why does that problem matter? How much does that problem cost the person that you're selling it to? How much is that problem personally impacting that person you're selling it to? Nobody cares about your product. They only care about their problem. So once you get refocused on the problem, and you understand its value proposition potentially, if you can solve that problem, not the value proposition of your cool feature, but the value proposition of the solution to that particular stakeholder, then come up with a way of testing it. And the only way you really can test it is through pre-launch sales. So what we'll typically do is build a design prototype, which looks like a very realistic looking user experience of the product. You go out and demo that to potential stakeholders and figure out who that early adopter niche is, and then demo the product to them and offer them some very high value sales opportunity to buy in early. And you haven't even started developing the product yet. And if you're able to, and if you offer a high enough value sales opportunity to the stakeholder who recognizes that they don't want to miss out on this opportunity, and they also know that this is something they have to get solved, so they know they're going to buy your product when it comes out, then you'll start selling in enough volume to prove that you've got product market fit, which is then your anchor to then build the product. If you
So
can't sell it in high enough numbers to prove product market fit, then pivot and figure out what you need to do to make that happen. And if there's no way to make it happen, then fail fast and cheap.
I once worked for a gentleman and we used to build a business up to $500,000. And then we'd get together and have a meeting and we call it a pull the plug meeting. We
Yeah.
had to determine at $500,000 in volume whether or not we would continue to keep going down this direction. This was a super
Yeah.
wealthy guy. And this is how we built his businesses. And we got to that
It's so
place, it was
interesting.
like,
Yeah.
you know, I was there when we pulled the plug on
Please give me his number.
I'd be happy to connect you. Um,
Yeah.
you know, everything you said to me makes total sense. Like, look, the market is going to determine whether or not, no matter what Steve Jobs says, the market usually determines whether or not they buy it or not. Are we solving a problem for them or something that they're looking for? They care more about that than they do about what our technology is going to be or whatever the solution is. And to pre-test this all, pre-sell it all, do it all. The assumption, I loved what you had said, test every assumption, right?
Right.
Now, do people not do this because they're just so intolerant or impatient, or do they not do this because of another reason? Because to me, this sounds like, oh man, this is going to take a long time to do this. This might take me, 3, 5, 6 months, whatever, to do this type of thing, to kind of get it in fit. And most people are like, well, I got to sell something now.
Yeah, but then they spend 2 years building the software without charging for it.
Right.
They want to get it done in 3 months, and then 2 or 2.5 years later, they haven't generated any revenue yet.
Right.
They're afraid to ask customers to start paying if they're on free trials, because what if they say no?
Right.
And there's all kinds of reasons why people don't do this. One is they're afraid to ask people to buy their product because before it has everything. Two is failure to pull the trigger syndrome, where they feel like it's not perfect, it doesn't have enough features, it doesn't do everything. It's another reason is that if they feel like they've got to get feedback from the market with free trials first, and then they get feedback, which a lot of it can be misleading because these are people that are not invested in the product. And then they're working on the feedback and trying to implement it and still not charging. And it's a lot more fun to design and build your product and start to realize your vision from an actual product perspective than it is to actually build the sales and marketing engine and optimize that for success, because that's not fun unless the sales are happening, and then it's fun. But it's scary. It's scary to ask people to give you money. And a lot of founders really have a fear of asking customers to start buying their product before they feel like they have something that they're proud of.
Right. That makes so much sense. And there's a couple of really key points here. I mean, they're all very powerful points. Number three, getting feedback from free trials. There is a difference between a free trial user feedback and a paid user feedback.
Oh yeah.
And so if we take this, and the second thing is that it's more fun building the design and being the creator than actually building the sales and marketing engine of the
Yeah.
process. So then I would ask the question, and by the way, folks, we're speaking on this to David Hirschfeld, and the company is called Tekyz,
Tekyz, yeah.
Tekyz.
Yeah.
And so this begs the question, because I ask this question to a lot of people: what business are you really in? Right? So we meet, we go, hey, Joe, how are you? Right? Or hey, Mary, how are you? And they go, hi, Doug. And I go, oh, so what do you do for business? What business are you in? Inevitably, they say things to me like, I'm in HVAC, I'm in roofing, I'm in I'm in consulting, I'm a coach, right? I'm in the software business, right? I think that's the wrong answer, David. I'd love to get your feedback, right? I think that
I agree with you.
Yeah. So the right answer is,
yeah,
I'm in the business of selling my software, right? I'm in the business of, so we've got to become a sales and marketing engine first, and become a sales and marketing driven company first. Are there some examples of like some well-known companies that that happen? In the software side of the business, I'm like, is Salesforce.com come to mind or something like that? I mean, or did they build the thing first and then go out and sell it, or
there are a lot of examples of that. Well, I'll give you a really famous one, and whether you like the man or not, because he's so controversial these days, when Elon Musk started selling his electric car, it was a prototype sports car. It didn't exist. And he sold thousands of them in a pre-sale before he built it. So that's a perfect example of a really high risk pre-sale model. And he didn't have the gravitas at the time to be able to do sales. It's one thing when you're Elon Musk after he's built Tesla, right? But it's something else when he's just starting out on that. And he was able to, yeah, exactly. So with, let me see, it was, there's some very big, famous SaaS companies that started this way as well. And I don't want to quote who they are because I might be saying the wrong one. But there are there are several of them. But I will say that this is the same concept is like and what you were saying about knowing what your business is falls into the same category as understanding the problem you're solving. So if you're a roofer, are you installing roofs, or are you selling people, are you improving people's home efficiency by replacing a roof that's inefficient, or or protecting their home because their roof they have is a fire hazard or whatever, right? So I ask founders when they come to me with an idea, I said, tell me the genesis of that idea. Where did it come from? And very often, but not always, it comes out of a personal problem that they were struggling with that they
Right.
needed to solve. And then I ask them, okay, let's nail down what's the problem you're solving. Give me really the root level problem. And there's a difference between a problem statement and a root level problem statement. I spend a lot of time with founders on nailing this because you have to understand who the early adopter is to get down to the root level. But but I ask them what problem they're solving, and they say, well, we make it easier for real estate investors to find their next real estate investment. And I say, okay, cool. That's a great benefit. What is the problem? I don't hear a problem there. And they
Right.
go, oh, yeah, right. Well, what we do is we provide a network of all these homes that are investment properties. And based on their criteria, we surface homes that actually have high value and high return. I said, cool feature. What's the problem you're
Problem.
solving? And they go, what? And they're like tilting their head, and and then I have to work with them to get back to the problem statement, which is how difficult it is for real estate investors to find real estate investments. This is just one example, right? I
Sure.
can name lots of examples like this, but real estate investments that fit their portfolio guidelines. I said, okay, great. Why does that matter? Explain to me why that matters. And if you don't get down to um, I I I'm losing money when or I hate it when the problem happens because of the negative outcome. That's a root level problem. I feel personally impacted in a significant way because I'm afraid I'll lose my job or whatever, if we don't get control of our employees leaving because they're unhappy. And I'm afraid because my chance of keeping this job diminish monthly until I get control of this process, right? That's a root level problem because when you say, look, some people are worried that their careers are crippled if they can't get control of their employee loyalty, and then that person's going to lean forward because they're going, I am struggling with this right now, right? You just nail down the thing that really matters to them. So now, the product may not be specifically related to that, but in the context of a manager a mid-level manager in an organization, that is root level problem statement speaks to that person directly. So, but getting to the root level problem is like orders of magnitude beyond where most founders start. They had a problem, they came up with a solution, they fell in love with the solution. And now that's all they can talk about is the product, the solution, and how everybody's going to love it. And these are all, how they're going to be a unicorn. These are all code words for I'm going to fail.
So what's the difference between a problem and a root level problem? Because I know some people are scratching their head on this one. So
Okay, I got to tell you. So let's say I'll give you an example because it's easier to understand from an example. And this is a real example. I've got a new survey software that makes it possible for people to get the actual information they need in business at the time when they need it. So that sounds like, okay, that sounds like a really important problem, but I don't know why that matters to me. So why does that matter? So let's take two different circumstances. One, that employee situation. I'm a mid-level manager. I'm a manager in a company. I have 120 people that report to me, not directly, but through 7 other managers that work underneath me. And I've got one department where I keep losing employees. And I don't even realize I'm losing those employees. They're leaving with their intellectual property because they've been here for a long time. They know their jobs. And they're leaving us these really nasty reviews about what a lousy company we are. only in this one department. But I don't know that's happening until they've left and left me these bad reviews. And now we have to increase our advertising costs to recruit new people and the training costs to replace them. And the advertising costs go up because we're getting these negative reviews. People don't want to come to work here now. So we have to work to change that perception. This is all disaster, right? And of course, I'm not going to stay in this job much longer if I don't get control of this. That's a root level problem. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job because I have employees leaving and leaving nasty reviews, which is ruining our brand and costing us money. That's a root level problem, right? The general problem was and if I had a survey software that would tease out in the right way information about how employees feel about their jobs, I would have figured this out before those employees left and coached their manager on what he needed to do or she needed to do to improve the employee relations and maybe go out and speak directly to those employees. So the cost impact could be dramatic for the company and personally impactful to me as the manager who's worried that I can't get control of the situation. But the idea that I'll have the information I need in a timely manner doesn't really mean much.
Yeah. So
Right.
the overall problem there is I'm losing people. The root level problem is really taking it down into the core of how it's super impactful
To that person.
to that person.
Right.
Right.
Right. Now,
So
same situation, one more thing, same situation, right? Same, except now we're talking about a restaurateur. He has 3 restaurants. And in one of the restaurants, he's got a problem with the server or somebody there. And so people are leaving disgruntled, and the restaurateur doesn't know this until a Yelp review comes out about how horrible, 1-star Yelp review, how horrible this is. And that's like death for a restaurateur, right?
right.
Because reputation is the only thing that matters to them. And if the restaurateur knew that there were people unhappy in the restaurant as a result of their meal, maybe as some survey after the meal, maybe a way of teasing out this information, whatever it is, he could have or she could have intercepted that person, offered them a free coupon, apologize, and say, our brand matters to us. We're gonna please tell us, make that person feel like they matter. And now you've just avoided this terrible thing. So that root level problem sounds very different, even though it's the same software and the same generic problem that's being solved.
Right. And if they had the tool to intercede like that, they could have had a 1-star review be a 5-star review of how much they cared, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Exactly. So all of this makes total sense to me. And, I see infomercials do this same type of thing, but differently, right? It's like an infomercial, they'll sell something like, here, you're on the side of the road at night and you have this big blinking light that, it's like a flare, right? And so they put together the infomercial itself. And then I always see 6 to 12 or 6 to 8, 10 weeks delivery, right, on the back end. And so I went and asked some of my friends who do infomercials, I said, why is that? And they said, well, because we don't have the product.
Right. Right. Because they need to see what the volume is before they start to, right?
That's exactly
before the product is built. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So they're like, we run this, we spend money, time, and energy into this. If we get enough orders, then we'll build the product. If we don't, then we'll just refund the money and we won't build the product.
Right. Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. And that's the same thing with pre-launch sales with software, because you basically will have to guarantee that you're going to produce the product, or you'll refund their money and give them some kind of time frame. Doesn't have to be the whole product. It could just be the MVP. You might be demoing a lot more features than what you're going to start deliver initially.
Right.
And you're honest with them and you tell them these things, but they see a very realistic looking design prototype that demos like a real product. They make up a story in their head about how far along you must be in development, you're just testing or whatever. And so the trust factor of whether you can build it or not doesn't factor into their decision if this is done right.
Makes tons of sense. So
yeah.
Let's talk
that root level. I want to go back to the root level because that's a critical success factor, understanding the root problem, and then understanding all the different niches that you might be able to market to and picking the one early adopter niche where that perception of the problem from a personal impact perspective is very high because you need that to get them to hear you when you're talking about it, right? They'll lean forward if you're talking about their problem and they are highly personally impacted by it. And the cost is also high because those are two independent numbers. How much that problem is costing them and how much it personally impacts them. It could be cost a lot, but have virtually no personal impact. And because, well, I'm in an industry, everybody in our industry deals with this problem. Yeah, it costs us a lot, but nobody cares because we're focused on other things. So I'm not going to get management support to try to do something about this right now when we have all these other initiatives, right? That's low impact, personal impact, high cost. The other is can be true too, where person hates this, it just drives them nuts, but doesn't really cost me or the company anything. So I can't justify, getting some new software that we're going to be paying monthly for it, but I wish I could find some way to deal with it. Okay, so that's the opposite situation. You can get them to consider your product. You're not going to get them to pay very much for it. That's not a good early adopter either. So you want both of those as high as possible. And that's how you figure out who your potential early adopter is.
That makes tons of sense. So let's take it from there now, because again, folks, those of you who are like, man, this is fascinating. I'm not necessarily building a software product. Well, you are launching new stuff, right? So you can take the
Right.
same concepts and construct.
Yeah.
So and just
Yeah, and you
apply
see
it.
it all the time. And you see it all the time with physical products like with Kickstarter, where people are crowdsourcing pre-launch sales, right?
Right,
You're buying a product they haven't manufactured yet, same sort of thing. But that's in a mass market consumer world, right? In the
right.
B2B world, it's a little different, high value B2B world.
So, all right. So I've got high perceived value on my problem. I have high perceived cost. It's costing me. My boat is leaking so much water that I've got, 30 days and my complete fleet's gone, right? That type of thing. We got,
Right. Right.
and,
Yeah.
and we go from there. How do I transition from that? I've got the data. I understand this. I know what the problem is. I know what the root level problems are. It seems like a go. What do we do next?
So we're also building a design prototype in parallel while we're doing this work.
Yep.
Um, the design prototype can take anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks to build, depending on the level of sophistication of the product. Not because it takes that long to create the prototype, but it takes that long in the iteration of it because you're to go back and forth with the founder.
Yep.
Because when they start to see it all come together, they start to realize some of the workflows may not facilitate the problem solution that they're looking for. And then we go back and we change it, which is fine. We want all the iteration during this process because the cost to do that iteration is very low compared to doing it during the development phase.
Yes.
And once the prototype is done and you've figured out who the early adopter is and you've really validated it well, you probably already have 4 or 5 potential sales with some of the early adopters that you've reached out to during this interview process at the end of this niche analysis. And then you build a marketing funnel and go and test that model. Maybe it's webinar, maybe it's one-on-one demos, but you build a marketing funnel with the idea that you want to get in front of people to be able to do pre-launch sale demos.
And so let's talk about building trust in that process, right? Because just as we build trust in a sales call, we're now going to go and we're going to start, for the better lack of term, pitching our opportunity or our wares, if you will, right? And presenting how are we structuring that particular pitch to build the trust out on that process?
So so first of all, you've nailed down that early adopter. You understand what matters to them, both from a personal impact and from a cost perspective.
Yep.
So you're speaking to them in those terms, right? And that's how you get their attention and why they want to watch your demo. And then while you're demoing the product, you don't spend all the time talking about setting them up and doing some presentation to show them why this matters, because people just fall asleep when they see slides. You get right into the product and have a narrative about the problem that you're struggling with and how this mitigates that problem and the cost of that problem and engaging the person if it's a one-on-one demo. Like, my understanding is this is a problem for you. Tell me about um, uh, how you've dealt with this problem in the past. How much does this problem impact you? Because maybe you got the wrong person in the call in the demo and it doesn't impact them. You don't want to waste their time or yours. How much does it cost you? Have you tried other products? These are the kind of things you want to be asking them,
Mhm.
right? Does this, let me show you what we're doing. Does this mitigate the problem for you? We designed this specifically for that problem, but maybe we didn't get it right. Yeah, so give us some feedback. So then and now it's a consultative kind of discussion. You're getting their feedback. They're being recognized as being important in this process. And when they say, yeah, this is exactly what I need, this is going to probably save me even more than I said because it also solves this other problem. Then you say, look, we have an opportunity right now to get to buy this product. If you're interested in a pre-launch mode, we guarantee we'll have first version of the product out in 3 months, or we'll refund your money, immediately upon request. And if you buy in now, you can get a lifetime license for paying for 1 year of the subscription fee, or whatever the high value opportunity, whatever that high value trigger is that
Yep.
matters to that stakeholder. And if you know the stakeholder early adopter niche really well, you also know what triggers matter to them in terms of what makes this really high value. And if you've hit them right and they know they're going to buy this and they don't want to miss out on the opportunity, they'll buy. They'll pay you right then for this advanced purchase, and that helps you fund development. And it also makes it clear that you've got a market when the product does come out to sell to. Not with one sale, but with enough sales, 3 to 10 sales, depending on the particular market and the cost of the product and things like that. And what you're looking for is closing ratio. How many demos do you have to do to get one to buy? How do you calculate the cost of getting that person on the demo, or that are the people on the demo if it's a webinar? And what's the closing ratio? Because you want to come up with what's your cost of acquisition, and what you're looking for is a lifetime value. What you're assuming, you have to make some assumptions here. How long do you expect the life of a customer to be in this product, based on the market and the type of product and the kind of problem you're solving and the difficulty and things like that. And you want to see a nice, like 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 is like the golden ratio
Yep.
in SaaS world. You would like to see a 3 to 1 ratio between that lifetime value versus that cost of acquisition. That's how you know you've got product market fit.
Hmm. Wow.
And now it's a repeatable process if they're buying, and you've done this 3 to 10 times. If it's a real high-end product, 3 times is probably enough. If it's a bit more of a mass product, then you might need 10 sales, 15 sales to be sure, because you might do webinars with 30 people on it, and you get 2 or 3 people purchasing each time. And how many, and can you do that repeatedly? Because if you get that, now you can add energy to the system and accelerate the sales, right? Because you've got a repeatable process that generates income.
With that lifetime value versus cost of acquisition, we're measuring this. We're looking for a 3 to 1 ratio roughly as the ideal. 2 to 1's acceptable. That's kind
It depends on the length of that lifetime value. If that lifetime value is 10 years, then you need a much higher ratio, because otherwise you're going to get upside down. If that lifetime value is very short-lived, then you need a much lower lifetime value. And I don't have a specific formula. We, kind of come up with the formula for this every time I do it with a client.
Yep.
It's specific to each product and each business domain. But 3 to 1 is your classic SaaS ratio for that. That ratio is typically 3 to 1.
And once you have these users on, the users are paying
Yeah.
for the development component of the process and maybe some of the additional funds that you need to run the company. once that's established, then you're in business, you've got proof of concept moving forward. Do you do any future iterations like this, the same thing, or is it just
Oh,
like,
sure.
okay,
Yeah, you do. I mean, once you've got paying customers using the product, you're getting invest feedback from an invested group.
right,
So then you divide that feedback up by now, okay, here's the other piece. You've built your MVP now, right? You've got clients that have paid for it that are using it. Now you're working on product solution fit, which means that, okay, you promised them you're solving this problem. They felt like it would solve the problem, which is why they buy it. That's product market fit. But now they're not using the product and engaging with it to solve that problem because you don't have product solution fit. It's like, oh, okay, we need to get feedback, spend our time talking to the customer, ask why it's not solving the problem the way they were hoping it would, what it would need to do that, and getting that nailed down until you see consistent engagement with the product in the right way, right? Because otherwise you're going to lose those customers, and then your lifetime value gets shrunk
right,
dramatically.
right,
So the MVP is for product solution fit. Everybody thinks it's for product market fit, but it's not. It's for because you're not selling the MVP to somebody, you're selling the concept to somebody, the problem mitigation. They are using the MVP to now engage and to solve that problem. And if it's not solving their problem, then you've got to work on getting it to where it does and spend your time really working on the product solution fit. Once you have that, then and that extends the life of your customers because you now have the process to get them on board. But if they leave, your reputation is not good. It's not going to help you with future sales. They're certainly not going to refer it to other people. And that lifetime value calculation that you figured out is all of a sudden shrunk, and you don't have your ratio. So you need to get that back up. So this is the kind of the process of nailing it down and getting that piece of the business model solid. Now you may want to go after other markets. It may take changes in the product to really satisfy these other markets. So just morph the prototype, go do those demos, do pre-launch sales before you start building for these other markets. Or you may come out with whole new modules that you want to market that you think you can add additional revenue from your existing customers.
mm-hmm,
So do the design on that, create a video, do some mass marketing to your existing customers, and see how many will buy in early on some kind of really high value model again, right? Instead of the ongoing subscription. And people go, well, now I'm giving up all this long-term subscription revenue. Yeah, you are. But compare that against how much you would be giving up if you go out and get an investor to do this for you
right.
instead of your customers paying for it, right? You're usually giving it up at a measurable fraction of a percent of your market when you do pre-launch sales to raise the same amount of money that you would by giving 20% away to a seed investor.
Makes total sense. David, how do people get a hold of you? I'm sure they're sitting there going, okay, I need to talk to this guy. How do they get a hold
Okay,
of you?
sure. If you go to tekyz.com, which is spelled Tekyz, tekyz.com, and you just go to the bottom of the homepage, there's a contact us form. I will receive those directly. If you want to email me directly, you've made it to the end of this podcast episode. I'll verbally give you my email. It's david@tekyz.com. And I love to hear from you, whether it's because you need help in this respect or you're struggling with an existing software developer and you just want some advice and feedback, what's reasonable to expect, whatever it is. I just like to help people. So I'm happy to engage anybody in a conversation.
Excellent. And folks, if you wouldn't
Yeah,
mind, put in the subject matter, CEO sales strategies or CEO SS or something like that, just so
yeah,
David knows it's coming from here. Not because I get paid on it, but I intend on keeping a relationship with David for a long time, especially after this interview. So I
good.
appreciate you being here, David. Any last words? Like somebody's like thinking, should I do something like this? Or there are kind of last words of wisdom, if you will.
Okay, sure. I'll throw one additional thing out. This has to do with how you build trust in a sales situation, whether it's software or services or whatever. I get people that call me, they want to they're looking for a software developer. And there's a lot of us out there. I don't think we're all the same. I articulate why we're quite different than others, but that's not the point of this. But before they believe anything I'm going to say, I've got to get them out of this. They're looking for a vendor into they see me as somebody who can consult them.
Right.
And it usually happens within the first few minutes of the first call with a client. And it's a quick transition, and it's because they want to do something that I don't agree with, or that I feel like is in the wrong direction, or something that I will disagree with in some way. So, and most salespeople won't disagree with a customer. They'll try, or if they do, they're trying to find some very slick way to get around saying that they disagree. I don't. I just say, look, I understand why you might want to do that, but I won't do it that way. And this is why. And when I do that, it creates a schism because this is not what they were expecting to hear or really wanted to hear. But then I create a bridge by saying, maybe take a look at it from this perspective, and I think you can accomplish what you're trying to do, and that's something that I would get behind. And now all of a sudden they go, wow, I'm getting help from this person, and I didn't actually ask them for help all of a sudden. And I didn't know, this isn't a technique I learned. It's just something I do naturally. And I noticed all of a sudden the relationship shifts in the first few minutes of the conversation where they're deferring to me and we're partners now, right? Trying to help each other instead of them looking for a vendor that they can contract. And it's amazing how powerful that shift is.
Well, it makes total sense to me, David, because most people are trying to sell somebody, right? And what you're doing is just saying, I want to sell only if it's the right win-win fit.
Right.
Right.
Is this a good partnership? Exactly.
Yeah, it's coming across very clearly. And it's like, look, I'm disagreeing for this reason. You can respect it or disrespect it. It's up to you, or you take it in or reject it, whatever you want. But if you look at it from this perspective, as you said, then it's now like it's non-threatening in the process of like, oh, okay, this guy's giving advice. Oh, that made sense. So now they're going to come over because a traditional somebody trying to sell, they're trying to overcome that right from the beginning versus align with their best needs of what they're looking for and making sure it's a win-win fit. So that's the reason I believe it works based on what I heard.
Yeah. And there's in the first few minutes of a conversation, there's always opportunity things that they're saying that don't necessarily sync with you. And so you just don't kind of slide around them, just go straight into them. And which is just kind of my personality. Somebody nicknamed me the sledgehammer once, but I just go straight at them. Because I know what I believe is the right way to approach something. I know when I don't know what the right way is, and I'm honest about I don't know. And so it's easy to find those opportunities. I don't really look for the opportunities; they just naturally happen.
Yep.
But when I look back on what makes these trust relationships happen so quick, I realize it's that one factor. It's that all of a sudden they believe they're talking to somebody who's really honest and that they can trust. And that just shifts the relationship. They want to work with me from that point forward. Yeah. I have one more little technique I figured out because I tested a lot of different ways. The hardest thing to get from a potential client is what's their budget, right? If you're doing consulting or it's a project, right? Because they don't want to give it to you because they want you to give them an estimate or a quote. They're afraid they're going to give you too low a number or too high a number, and now you're going to create your estimate around that.
Right.
So, and this is also part of the whole trust thing. So when I always ask people, give me an idea of what your budget tolerance is. I know, and I say, I don't need to know your exact budget, but what's your tolerance? And they go, well, I'm not really sure what my budget's going to be. I said, no, a lot of people don't. Or they say, I'd rather you give me an estimate, not tell you. And I said, well, I won't do that. That's a good point where I can disagree. I said, I won't do that. You're basically asking me to do a lot of work because we put together very sophisticated estimates that we spend time with you to get all your requirements. So we're working on your behalf already, and we're not charging you for any of that. And I'm only asking in return, I understand what your budget tolerance is, because sometimes I have clients that say, oh, I've got $700-800 put aside for this $150,000 project. Why? They have no idea. So, and I don't want to, spend a lot of time and effort and cost with my team If that's the case, I say, well, no, we know it's not 700. I know you don't know it's not 700, but I really need to understand what your tolerance is. Is it five, I know you know what you can't afford. Is it 5 to 10,000, 10 to 20,000, 20 to 40,000? I just keep pausing and doubling. They will stop me every single time when I go one level above what their tolerance is. They'll say
Mm.
150 to 300,000. They go, oh no, there's no way I could spend 300,000 on this. We have 100,000 is the most we could, every single time. I've only had two times in 18 years where somebody didn't give me their budget. And I ended the call because I won't do a proposal if they won't share that with me.
That's brilliant. There's an old adage that comes from the sales world, but if somebody doesn't answer a question directly, just ask them a multiple choice question, right?
Right.
And you've taken that formula and adapted it to this like a master, so that it makes total sense to me that they would give you that. And by the way, folks, what David's telling you, it works awesome with children too. Like if they won't tell you like what the truth is, and you just ask them a multiple choice question, and they'll pick the one out that they didn't dare say in the first place.
Oh,
So,
that's really funny. Yeah.
so
Yeah. And I won't stop doubling. 2 million to 4 million, 4 million to 8 million. And then I'm going, come on. Is that your budget can go above that? And if they say, oh, of course, we can, and then I know I'm not dealing with a real person, a real project either, but that's
right.
very rare. Um, they will stop me every single time
Makes
and
total
tell me what
sense,
their
and it's
budget is.
so logical. And it's just how humans are wired. So it makes total sense to me that that works. David, I want to thank you so much for being here today and really bring in your A+ game. I really, appreciate that. I know there's people that are sitting there. I don't know if some of them are smiling or some of them are a little like weepy right now, trying to figure it out. But either way, folks, if you want to know more about David or what he does, reach out to that information that he gave you, and we'll post that in the show notes as well for you to have. And David, I'd love to have you back on another episode if you're open to it.
Absolutely. I would love it. A fun conversation.
Awesome. Well, let's do that. And folks, those of you, please take copious notes. And I would ask you to listen to this again and again. There's a lot of subtle wisdom nuggets that are here that you may not catch on the first listen, but you certainly will on the repeated listenings. So, David, thanks again for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
Wow, I hope you got a lot out of this. I certainly did, and it's really about creating market fit, market demand, and monetizing that process prior to you actually even investing money into a big way of any type of creative product development. And I thought what he said, that it's a lot more fun to design and build things than it is to build a sales and marketing engine. And that's true because I mean, we specialize in building the sales and marketing engines, right? And so I find that people love to be in the creative space, but you got to remember what business you're in, which is the business of sales. And so you want to pre-sell this as much as you possibly can, and therefore fund that. And that's a way of rolling things out and testing those safely, as we talked about in the episode here. All right, so you know what I always say at the end, but before that, if you're interested in coming to our masterclass on follow-up, go to ceosalesstrategies.com/stop the leak, because follow-up is a big time leak in the sales funnels of people's lives throughout their whole customer journey. And you're just dripping away money. You can easily add another 5 to even up to 20% in your revenue. And I've seen this happen with companies just by solving the follow-up issue. And again, that's ceosalesstrategies.com/stop the leak. All right. Until next time, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. Go out and sell something today. Play win-win, help people solve a problem, gain an opportunity, gain a goal. And they win, you win. Don't discount. You don't need to build up your value. Until next time, to your success.